We are your home theater and AV questions answered. This is AVRant. Want your home theater or AV question answered by Tom and Rob? Send it to question@avrant.com.
And now we're moving on to Don G. Don's new media room is under construction, and it will be 18 feet 2 inches long by 15 feet 6 inches wide with 10-foot ceilings. He'll be using his Marantz SR7010 AV receiver, along with his PSB Stratus Gold towers and center up front, and his dual SVS SB2000 subwoofers. Alrighty, gonna rock the house.
Yeah, so if you're watching the YouTube video, youtube.com/c/AVRant, by the way, if you want to see our videos, this was a previous picture. Don't worry, that isn't where the chairs are going to go. That's just where they happen to be arrayed at the moment. So we talked about Don's setup in the past and suggested he wants the two recliners, the two chairs to be his primary seats. We're like, put those closer to the TV, get them in front of the middle of your room, so don't put them at 9 feet back from the front wall, which is basically the middle of his room. Put him in front of that, because he's right now got a flat panel, and then put the sofa behind that as a second row. That's what we suggested last time, just to remind people what was going on there.
Right, so just slide those little squares around in your mind, and he's got 2 rows now of seating.
That's right.
He has a pair of PSB bipole surround speakers. They have the typical bipole trapezoid shape with the 2 angled sides and the ability to be flush mounted on the wall. In his previous setup, he had them mounted very close to the ceiling, so he angled them down. He also didn't have room for surround back speakers in his old setup, but now he will with the new setup. So, should he continue using his bipole surround speakers, or should he sell them in favor of having direct firing speakers? He'll be getting 1 pair of direct firing speakers to use as surround backs. Should he make it 2 pair? Or perhaps put the direct firing speakers on the sides and use the bipoles as the surround backs? Lots of interesting questions. Those are good questions.
They are.
Yeah. So what is your best bet when you go from the diffuse sort of 2 regular surround speakers, and now you're going to have 4 speakers in the general area, some behind you, some next to you. What's better at that point?
So the good news is you can think of bipoles, because there's I'll just quickly explain the difference. There's dipoles, which means you've got these 2 sets of drivers, right? So you got a tweeter and a woofer that are angled to fire sort of towards the front of the room, and then a second tweeter and a second woofer that are angled to sort of fire towards the back of the room. Now, in a dipole speaker, those sets of drivers are out of phase with one another. So when the front ones go out, the back ones go in, and then vice versa. So they're out of phase with each other, and that creates a null right in the middle. So in between those 2 sets of drivers, you get a null where there's no sound at all. The sound all cancels out right there.
Why is that useful? I never have understood that.
Yeah, that was when they were trying to mimic the array of surround speakers in a full-size commercial movie theater, which when you're in a full-size theater and sitting in the middle of the theater, it's very difficult to pinpoint the side surround because you have this whole array of speakers over there.
Okay.
So it's over there to my right, but it's not a pinpoint location.
Yeah, okay.
So if you had 1 speaker, you'd be able to pinpoint it. But the array makes it very diffuse. So the dipole speaker also creates a very, very diffuse sound. You can say, I know the sound's coming from my right, but I don't know exactly where on my right.
Yeah, it's like having a weird, schmooey, giant speaker.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's like taking your front, left, and right speakers and wiring them out of phase. You no longer get that nice center image. The sound just kind of comes from there-ish.
There-ish. An area, a feeling.
Yeah, so that was the dipole speaker, and we don't really favor using those now that we're getting into Atmos and all this stuff, where you want to be able to direct the sound with fairly good pinpoint accuracy, these objects that we can move around. So yeah, that's kind of why we aren't favoring dipoles, but bipoles take both of those sets of drivers and fire them in phase. So really, you just have 2 monopole speakers that are firing in kind of separate directions. And if the angles are correct, and PSB knows how to do this, if the angles are correct, you just end up with a very wide dispersion speaker. That's really all it is. Yeah. So instead of calling it diffuse, I would just call it very wide dispersion. Which, when you got 2 rows of seats, is a useful thing.
Hey, now, there you go, yeah.
That's a useful thing. So I would keep the bipoles. I would put them on your side walls. I would mount them so that you have a height-wise, so that you have a clear line of sight to each of your listeners. So that'll be maybe 2 feet above your heads when you're sitting down.
Mm-hmm.
And then I would put these ones, these bipoles, I would put them a little bit behind your primary row.
A little behind the front row, little in front of the back row.
That's right.
So
not
they each
necessarily
kind of
right in the middle, not
Right,
necessarily
right.
perfectly split, but maybe a foot or two behind your primary seats. And now you got this nice wide dispersion on your sides, but you still get pretty good pinpoint accuracy of where that sound is coming from. So you're kind of getting a nice compromise, a nice almost best of all worlds type of solution.
Oh, that's not bad.
Don't put diffuse speakers of any kind, or even super wide dispersion. Don't put them on your back wall. You're supposed to have traditional forward firing speakers on your back wall as you surround backs.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, no reason to replace these. Put them on your side walls. Clear line of sight a little bit behind you.
There you go. There's your ideal setup, and that actually makes good sense. If he's using the bipoles as his surrounds, where exactly should they be placed? I think we just kind of covered that.
I think we covered that one. There you go. Yep.
Yeah, directly to either side of his primary seats, but a little behind.
Yeah,
Yes.
and he did ask, should he just flush mount them? And yes, just flush mount them. They come with their flush mounts.
Yeah.
If you're not mounting them too high, and he already said he doesn't want to do that again. So like I say, just clear line of sight to each of your listeners. That's what you're going for.
Right.
Probably about 2 feet above your head.
There you go. Moving on to another question from, I've already forgotten who we're talking to. Don G. Sorry, Don G.
No worries.
He'll be using his 65-inch Panasonic Plasma for the time being. I understand that. I'm still using a Panasonic Plasma. We talked through his seating options last time that he wrote to us. I keep saying us, but not me. I wasn't here.
The royal we.
The royal we, too. Well, I'm part of the show, so royal us.
That's right.
And we wound up suggesting that he sit 7 to 8 feet away, so that his seat would be in front of the center line of his room. We just talked about that, and to give him a pretty nice field of view for that screen size. In a year or two, though, he's thinking he'll upgrade his display. And he isn't sure whether going projection or sticking with a flat panel is the right choice. The room is dedicated, so he could make it totally dark, but he's sort of leaning flat panel because it would be easier and would probably fit his viewing habits a bit better. There are some pretty large flat panels now, that's true. 85 inches is not uncommon, but if he goes to a larger screen size like that or to a projection setup, what would be his new seating distance? He asks because the last time he wrote in, he was concerned about where to install his ceiling speakers for Atmos, and we said it all depended on where he puts his seats. Well, my first thought is, if you get a bigger screen and you're just moving seats back, as long as you don't have a permanently installed platform for that back row, it shouldn't be too hard to move the seats. Moving surround speakers shouldn't be too hard if you want to kick them back a little bit. Your rear surrounds don't go anywhere.
But in ceiling Atmos
But in
speakers,
ceiling,
yeah, that's a little bit of a thing. So yeah, I mean, this is a great question. I completely understand where you're coming from, because you don't want to go installing in ceilings and then going, but now I got the larger screen, so now I have to move them back. I think, since he wants to lean flat panel anyway, and look, flat panels still have very real advantages over projectors, particularly for HDR. There's just no question that when it comes to HDR viewing, flat panels just kick the pants off of projectors still. Right. Maybe that'll change one day, but at the moment, that's still very much the case. And you're absolutely right. We're getting these 75-inch flat panels, really quite affordable even, good ones.
Yeah, like it's getting kind of crazy.
It is. Yeah. I mean, we're not talking about massive prices anymore. I mean, the 85-inch ones still tend to be pretty darn expensive. Yeah. But yeah, you can get certainly like a 75-inch. So let's say you're sitting at like the 7.5 foot distance that we sort of suggested there the last time, right? Mm-hmm. Let's say you keep that. You're sitting, 7.5 to 8 feet away from your current screen. That at the moment was giving slightly less than a 30-degree field of view, but we didn't want to get you so close to your current 65-inch screen that was going to start creating problems of its own, right?
Right. Yeah.
So you could bump up to to a larger screen size, but keep the same seating distance.
Yeah.
And that's just going to look, really nice and cinematic.
Yeah.
So,
I would say just put your seats now where you're just a little too far away from the 65. and then you give yourself the freedom of choosing whatever bigger flat panel screen you want in the future without having to move anything.
Yeah.
Just be a little too far away now. Just a little. Just a little. Be on the far side of that range that people, they say, what's the angle range of your field of vision that's recommended for...
yeah, well, I generally say, try not to go past about 45.
Yeah.
45 degrees. Yeah, but if you
what's
get
the low
into
end of that's recommended?
The low end?
Yeah, is 45
usually
ideal or...
Like 32.
32.
Right. Usually you're aiming for like a 32.
Yeah, I'd say shoot for the 32-degree field of view now. And then,
well, for 65 inches, you'd still have to be even closer, though. So
okay.
that,
all right.
I wouldn't do... I'm going to say stick with the 7 to 8 foot seating distance
okay. All right,
that we told you in the first one. So, okay, so I'm just going to try and work out a little bit here on the fly. I had a calculator problem, so that...
You want me to hum the Jeopardy theme? I could hum the Jeopardy theme.
No, we should be okay here. So I'm... Yeah, what are we going to end up with
math,
here? Getting there.
Trigonometry.
Yup, it is. It's some
Rob
things.
is doing math with angles.
Okay, there. Bring that up, and there, and voila. Well, what do you know? Okay, 75-inch screen. If you're 7.5 feet away, so eyes to screen, 7.5 feet. 75-inch screen gives you a 40-degree field of view.
Oh, that's nothing wrong
it's
with
really
that.
Nice. And the 85-inch screen gets you slightly more than a 45-degree field of view. So you're all the way up there. So I'm thinking 75-inch screen, same seating distance.
Yeah.
Superb HDR, pretty darn affordable, and you don't have to move your Atmos speakers.
That does sound like that sounds like the option right there.
Yeah, sounds like a winning combo to me.
It does.
So that's the advice I would offer.
Right, and the beautiful thing there is you don't have to take into account projector issues now or in the future.
Yeah.
All you're doing is hanging a bigger screen in the same spot, and you get a bigger impact experience.
And it still doesn't preclude you from getting a projector screen if you want to, and simply sitting in your back row instead of your front row.
That's true, you could. And suddenly the primary seating is one row back. You could do it.
Didn't have to move anything. You could, let's say you go ahead, you get a 75-inch flat panel in a year or two. You're still sitting in your front row. And then you're like, you know what? I want a really big cinema experience. So you go and get like a 135-inch projection screen, but it comes down in front of that 75-inch flat panel. And now you just go and sit in your back row?
Yeah.
Hey, man. Nothing had to move. Seats didn't move. Speakers didn't move. But you got screen choices.
And you can just put your feet up on your other guest's shoulders, just kick your feet up on the back of those chairs.
There you go, man. Okay. I'm very happy with that plan.
We feel good about this. We're coming to your house every 2 years when you buy a new television. Since he wants a 7.2.4 setup and he's using a Marantz SR7010, he needs at least 2 channels of external amplification. But prior to owning the Marantz, he was using a B&K 507 7-channel AV receiver. His PSB Gold speakers are a nominal 4 ohm load, and he's been told they actually dip below 4 ohms quite a bit and are quite power hungry. He isn't sure if it's really all just down to the amplifiers, but he thinks the speakers used to sound better being powered by the B&K than they do being powered by the Marantz. I understand that kind of psychological effect, and thinking about that and worrying that. My last amplifier, I swear, did better with the speakers in my living room than the new one does now. But it might be for other reasons. But I know how that feels.
And it might not be purely psychological.
Right.
There is a legitimate amplifier difference. B&K was using ATI designed amps in everything they were doing, and they were more powerful amplifiers. That's just objectively true. So it's not impossible in a case like this with low impedance, fairly low efficiency speakers. That could be a genuine difference. So I don't think you're nuts at all.
Right. No, I don't either. I think I have 6 ohm speakers as their nominal rating. That probably dip below that, so I might have heard some difference. Could he use his B&K 507 just as an amplifier? Sure. It does have multi-channel analog audio inputs, and the instructions in the manual say it can be set as a direct pass-through. Would that work and give him back the sound quality he was used to before, or should he just buy a separate Emotiva or ATI amplifier? My guess would be he could use it.
You can absolutely use it. Yeah. So he sent in a photo of the back, and just looking at that, it does have 5.1 analog inputs. Even though it has 7 amplifiers, it doesn't have a 7.1 analog input. It's a 5.1, and actually confirmed that by looking up the spec sheet a little bit ways down. It says analog audio input 5.1.
Yeah.
So it's not 7.1. However, you can put in 5 of your channels to this B&K, put it into that analog input mode that bypasses all processing and everything.
There you go.
You're going to want to select one volume knob level on the B&K and leave it there at all times. Never adjust the volume knob on the B&K after that, because at this point you just want your B&K receiver to work as a dumb amplifier. You don't want it futzing with the signal, and you don't want its volume changing. But you pick a volume level, usually 0 dB on the volume dial, but you could back that down if there's some noise floor or something going on, which there probably shouldn't be, ATI amps. But yeah, normally you leave it at 0 dB, then you are just using it as a dumb amplifier. You use your Marantz as pre-outs, you feed up to 5 channels into the B&K, and Bob's your uncle. Yeah. That'll work. No need to buy anything new.
Then you don't have to get rid of that wonderful looking receiver. Look at all those beautiful S-video inputs. Those were the days.
Yes. Yeah, there are a lot on there too, aren't there?
Yeah, I love
it,
man.
No HDMI though, no HDMI.
No HDMI, but I have a Panasonic receiver in my closet back over my shoulder here that I keep thinking I'm going to take somewhere and get fixed because I love it. And it died at some point in the past. It keeps blowing fuses, and it has S-video inputs, and it's just lovely good old days. And that should answer that question. And so we are done there.
Want your question answered? Send it to question@avrant.com. This is AVRant.
Now go out and listen to something.